Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. So today is the day we're finally going to look at this Ford Mustang engine. Stay tuned. I collected this from a guy about 1.5 to 2 years ago. He imported a Ford Mustang and this came with the car. He didn't want an inline straight six, he wanted a V8. So we pulled this, replaced it with a V8 and sold this as a spares or repairs project. I'm pretty sure it had spark plugs and I'm sure it had wires. I'm pretty sure it was a coil. Basically, I'm sure there was more than what I actually got. I didn't pay too much for this, but I expected it to be in better condition. I think the pictures that he listed this as must have been when he first pulled it from the car. I didn't get too fussy when I went to view the engine because I did negotiate the price down a fair bit. I may have paid about £240. It was somewhere on that price range. I think he was asking 350, 390, something like that. So I did get the price down quite a bit. So I wasn't going to get too fussy, but I did mention about the plugs. He said he took them all out and he put some WD down, and that's why the plugs went in when I picked it up. So I thought, fair enough, that could explain why the plugs are missing, if he has taken them out to put some WD down to see if he can kind of free it up. The other issue was it was on a pallet outside of his barn. This was literally a barn find, I guess you could call it. It was an old-fashioned wooden barn, and this was outside of it. He says it was dry stored for many years inside the barn. Hopefully that was the case because I had no plugs when I got there, so who knows. The freeze plugs, as you can see, the freeze plugs have completely perished. We're basically just going to kind of work on it and get it down to the point where we can try and free the engine up. That is my main goal today. I don't really have a plan of action. We're in full lockdown, so I figured got some spare time in my hands. Let's come in the garage and let's have a go at this and see if we can figure out why it won't turn over. So I did take the fan off when I got the engine because the engine was actually sticking out from the wall and this was actually quite dangerous, so I took that off. This was removed, not too sure why. I think I pulled it so I can see if this was actually holding the engine up, but it wasn't. But it's missing the cap. Obviously the leads are missing. I have the wire from the coil, but that's about all I have. I picked up some replacement freeze plugs. These are from the States. I also picked up an entire gasket kit. So I've got the engine out and it's more accessible now. We can get around all the sides. So let's start having a look and see what's going on. Figured I use the Ford Mustang flask for today's project. So when I first got this, the first thing I did is put some ATF down every single hole, and it has leaked down all of them bar this one. I've actually been in these recently. I use this guy here to get down inside and record the inside of these and see what was going on. I'll leave a link for that up above. What was interesting is this cylinder, the back one, is still full of ATF. Now all these leak down, and after 1.5 to 2 years that would happen. I've actually had someone at this end give it the full beans and you can hear something around here clunking. The rod could be damaged, the bearing cap might have just worn down and might not even be attached, it could be loose in the bottom. It could be a lot of things. I mean, I've had this engine now for, like I say, coming on the best part of 2 years. The first thing I did was go out and buy some parts for it, and I was ready to go and get a flex plate and a starter motor, a coil, some HT wires, the whole works. And then I discovered that knocker noise. I didn't have an endoscope at the time when I first got this engine, so I couldn't actually see down inside, but I don't know if you guys can work out with just a flashlight, but the top of the pistons are very crusty. That's what I was telling you about the ATF. It's actually still full and it hasn't dropped a little. It's literally right to the very top of the threads, which could indicate the rings are seized. I do believe this is from a Falcon originally, back in the day. I don't think it left the factory in a Ford Mustang. It definitely entered the UK in a Ford Mustang. Things that are in need of repair, replacement. Obviously the thermostat looks a bit crusty. The water pump is probably junk, that wouldn't surprise me. The generator alternator is locked up, which is quite common. I'd say new water pump is pretty standard. The harmonic balancer is junk, as you can see. The rubber is completely perished. It looks melted, in fact. It's solid, so that would need to be replaced also, which isn't a big deal. I mean, it is living in the UK because all these parts are very expensive, but you can source them. Depends how much money you want to basically put into it. At the end of the day, it is only inline straight 6, so it ain't no 289 V8 or anything like that, so unfortunately they're not that common and they're not that desirable. Polycarb obviously needs a rebuild. You have the manifold, seems to be okay. I can't see any cracking. The valve cover seems to be in decent condition. There's one or two little nicks where it's been caught, maybe getting it in out the car. I'm not too sure exactly if this is factory paint. Do these come this colour? What I do want to see is the oil. Now I would expect at least 1 litre, maybe 2 litres of ATF in the actual oil, so don't be surprised if it looks a funny shade of purple. I've already had this off in the past and it was quite clean. It should still be okay. So yeah, it's pretty clean inside. So the reason why I had the valve cover off when I first picked up the engine was I was hoping it might just be a stuck valve and that's why the engine wasn't turning. So let's get the oil out of this sump and in this pan and examine it. And hopefully this will give us a better understanding of what's going on. So we're getting a very nice thick sludge coming out. I think that might be about it. Probably half of that is ATF fluid, but not much oil came out, which is surprising. I thought there'd be a lot more than that, but what I'm looking at seems to be not too bad. Don't think I showed you guys the belt that came with this. I think we can agree that belt has seen much better days, but it's nice that it's there, so at least I know what size to buy if it comes to the point of actually getting a belt. Basically see the shape of how it was sitting. So there's a few things I could do next. The exhaust manifold could come off, but that won't help me out because there's no exhaust attached to this, so really that could stay attached. I think I'm just going to go straight for the bolts on the head, and basically I know it's going to be heavy because this is cast, so it's going to be some weight, but I might just take the whole thing off as one. We know the issue is probably going to be down here, so there's no point really messing about with all this stuff. So let's get these bolts removed and get this off and finally have a look and see what's going on. All the bolts have been removed and removed the push rods. Push rods are nice and straight, don't seem to be bent. The bolt back here gave me some trouble. As you can see, it's quite rusty down there. This bolt here, that was quite stubborn. As you can see, it was a bit corroded, but we got it out. The rest perfectly fine. Push rods seem to be fine also. This is a cylinder that is not seemingly working, but they seem okay. There's just this hose to remove and then the head should come off. Let's get this guy off. It's gonna make a bit of a mess, but we'll get it off and inspect the pistons and take it from there. So that is the head off, and that is just surface rust, so that's good. The top of the pistons don't look too clever, but that is just carbon, and as you can see, it is actually coming off quite easily. Probably something to do with the ATF that I put down. Interestingly, that is still the same colour. I expected that would have changed, but it hasn't. The walls, I don't want to scratch them, but they actually seem not too bad. Can't really feel a lip. This is the hose I've taken off. I think we'll get this out and inspect the piston and see what's going on and draw this mess. Plenty of mess. I'll get the rest of this out and I'll get back to you. A nice brown soup down there, nice and gooey. quite crusty as well. It's pretty clear that this guy is the one that is stuck, which is not surprising consider how much rubbish is in there. There's like things grown in here. It looks like the bottom of the Titanic. It's pretty grim. So I'm guessing this was possibly on the intake stroke. The carb has no air filter, so possibly some water has got down into the carb and into this cylinder, possibly, and filled the cylinder to the top. Would that cause this? So it's probably the wrong thing to do, but I've got a wire wheel. It's only brass, so it shouldn't do any damage. So that is before, and then the one I've been working on. It's got some pitting at the bottom there. It's pretty bad, but it would still run. That wouldn't stop it from running. But the actual cylinder itself, the wall, it looks like a lot of pitting, but this is actually surface. It's actually on the top, and I think that actually might warm out. So I don't know, guys. This actually might be able to save this, which would be fantastic if we could. So far, I'm quite happy. I think this is the worst one of all of them, and I think these ones, as you can see there, it's very minor surface rust. So I think this is going to be the worst one. If this is the worst, I reckon once we get the Homer over that, that won't be too bad at all. You guys are on top of the engine. I'm using a breaker bar, so let's see if we get any movement. Nothing. So we can go backwards a fraction. I should really have a brass rod or a massive socket, or maybe even a piece of timber, and just give it a good few hits. So I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to put some fuel in here and set it on fire. I'm going to do the next best thing, and I'm going to put more fuel and light it and leave it again another 15-20 minutes and see what that does. This has been burning now for at least 20-25 minutes and it's still going strong. So it's been about an hour. It lasted for about 40 minutes. It was basically 2-stroke oil that I put in there, 2-stroke fuel and oil. So it kind of smelled like a couple of dirt bags have been riding around the garage for the last hour, but it's cleaned up quite nicely, to be fair, but it's still stuck. It's been 2 weeks exactly since we last did any work on the Mustang engine, so let's get back to it. So I left off doing some work on this cylinder. I spent about an hour and a half, tried my best to get the cylinder to move. It would not move whatsoever. 2 weeks ago I left a good layering of WD-40 and it is still there today, so clearly we have not resolved the issue. It's probably best to take away some of these parts. They're in the way, it makes it lighter to push around, and we need to turn the engine. So the engine's looking a bit lighter. That'll be a lot easier to move around the garage and to flip upside down. So this is a C1DE, so basically C code 1960s, the 1 1961, we have a T stamped on the top here, so that's telling me this is a 170. So with the T stamp and the code, that's telling me this is from a 1961 Ford Falcon. So I say it's a 170 because we have 3 freeze plugs. The 170 only came with 3. The 200, which I wish this was, I think has 5. I think it's got a smaller one here and here, or down here somewhere, but there's only 3, so it's definitely a 170. So I expected a bit of a mess, but actually went okay. Let's get this guy off and see what's lurking behind this oil pan. Hopefully nothing too bad. So let's see what prizes we have inside of here. Wow. Look at this. That does not look great, of course, but it seems to look okay, not as bad as expected. I didn't know if I was going to come into this and have some bearings just sheared and all over the place, but everything looks to be intact. We have a 4-bolt main, which is correct. It's early 60s inline 6, so that is the correct pattern I'd expect to see. Could definitely get a brass rod down there and give it a few taps. Release this bottom bearing, of course, because obviously it won't go anywhere like that. I have just put a ratchet on one end, came over here and felt the connecting rod, and the connecting rod is moving. This is moving, the connecting rod is moving. This all seems okay. It looks like it's definitely the piston that is causing the issue. Yes, I know you're not supposed to use an impact on engine blocks. You can quite easily strip the threads, break a bolt. This isn't going to be a professional rebuild. I am by no means a professional. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I basically just wanted to quite simply free the motor up, put some new gaskets on, put a start motor, coil, ignition, and possibly build a stand and have this thing just running. Never intended on putting this back into a car, never intended selling it back on as a rebuilt engine, by no means. More than likely this will probably just get stripped back down and possibly used for parts on future projects. There's probably already a lot of comments basically saying I'm doing this all wrong, and that is definitely probably the case, but I'm an amateur, I'm learning as I go, having a bit of fun, so hopefully you guys are enjoying this, and let's continue on with stripping this engine down. We have a broken bearing. We have movement. We have a gap, and that has definitely dropped. And we got it out. It was a bit of a pain, if I'm honest, but we did it. I think we should put this in the parts washer, clean it up, and see how bad it is. heat has penetrated all the way through into the cap. On the rod itself, we have the same wear pattern, and on the actual rod, it's actually scorched. So this is probably why the engine was taken out of the car initially, I would imagine. I don't think it was as pulled as a working engine. I think it had issues, and I'm guessing what caused this issue with the bearings was the fact that the rod itself is barely movable. That is very stiff and very tight, and it should not be like that. There is a clear break there and here. Now, I don't think that was there already. I think I might have caused that because I've been hitting directly there and there, and it is broke right there. I was equally pounding on both sides, and I think that impact is possibly cracked the pistons. So I don't think that was the issue. The ring is broke also. Now if that ring was broke as it is, you can see and hear that ring is actually protruding out quite a bit. If that was like that in the engine, there'd be score lines all up and down the cylinder, and there's not. Because of that, I believe the bearings have worked harder and they've basically overheated and destroyed themselves. The piston is junk, bearings are junk, the rod is probably junk also. I know a machine shop can basically assemble them all together in a line, sort them out. You can probably get some new bearings, oversized bearings maybe, to compensate for that bit of extra tolerance, but that is very costly. This engine is pretty much junk, let's face it guys. There's the cost involved in this, it really isn't worth it. But this shouldn't damage the cylinders too much because they're pretty clean, it's light pitting. So let's see if we can turn this thing over by hand. The faulty cylinder is now clear, so in theory we should be able to turn this over. There we go, it's broke through all the rust and grime. I'm just going to clean that up and flip it back around and have a look at the top and just make sure the pistons are doing what they're supposed to do, nothing's wobbling about, just out of curiosity. That is just pure filth. That is pretty grim. So let's have a look. Top would be a top, 4 at the bottom, 2.5 bottom, 3.4 rest bottom, and then yep, 1 4 down, 1 up. That looks to be correct. So they have cleared up brilliantly, and that's just off a few rotations. I just don't know what to do with this, guys. I'm struggling. It is going to cost a lot. You're talking new pistons, new rings, possibly rods, definitely bearings, water pump, harmonic balancer, new timing chain, why not? Possibly a camshaft. Camshaft looks a bit suspect. Flex plate, flywheel, starter motor, obviously oil filter, plugs, pretty much the entire ignition system, coil, everything. Probably even a new fuel pump. The oil pickup looked a bit suspect. The mesh had perished, so probably need a new one of them. Makes sense with the pan off. New alternator and belt, of course. The carb is cracked there, which I never noticed before. I've only just noticed it a few minutes ago. Doing all this, new air filter, just to finish it off. New thermostat. The thermostat housing, it'll probably be okay. Could probably sandblast that. It's only around the edge here, it's corroded. Not so much for my application, but the engine mounts, they're perished, they're rubbish. I mean, that is a lot of cash. I think even in the States, that is probably going to be quite a bit of money. hundreds and hundreds and hundreds quite easily. In the UK, I'm probably going to pay hundreds just for the pistons alone. I think it's financially, it is the wrong thing to do, unfortunately. The intentions was to free this engine up. That was the main aim of this video, and we've done that. All these pistons move freely. If it wasn't for the broken ring and the shop bearings, I could technically put this back in, connect it all back up, and we could turn the whole engine by hand, and that was the aim of the video. So we succeeded in that part. So the next step, I think, would probably be strip this right back down to the block. That is something I've never done on any engine. Strip it right down to the core. This is the perfect time to do that. So I think in a future video, we'll come back to this and strip this right back. Possibly clean up all this paint. It might actually be pretty decent under all this dirt and grime. I've got freeze plugs. We could put freeze plugs back in. I could home these out. Could possibly do some work on the manifold, maybe play about with the valves, strip all them down. Maybe the valve cover, sandblast that, give that a paint. Don't know guys, just have a bit of fun. First time in God knows how many years, but that is very satisfying to see happen. Why don't you guys leave a comment down below and post what you think was the cause? I think the bearings, but could be something else. Could be the oil. Now, we did drain the oil, and as you've seen, only a tiny bit of oil came out. Now, I was thinking about that. I think most of that was probably ATF. So I'm hoping that possibly the previous owner, or the owner before him, drained the oil out. Maybe they drained the oil out for shipping purposes, but maybe the oil was all drained out, and basically when I've put the ATF in, it's just kind of mixed around that sludge and kind of give the illusion that there was actually oil in the block. I would expect a lot more damage if this engine was ran without oil, even for a short time. I think the oil was drained after the fact. So I think we'll leave this one here, guys. I've had great fun working on this, like a child at Christmas really. It's just a pleasure to work on something like this and just have a bit of fun. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. So this Ford Inline 6 will be back on the channel at some point. Probably not getting rebuilt, more than likely stripping it down into basically a block, but that will be in the future. But for the time being, guys, I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it. Like always, please like, comment down below, subscribe to the channel for future videos, and I'll catch you in the next one.